The fact is that John McCain still doesn't think it was a mistake to go to Iraq. Barack Obama knows that it was. That's judgment. John McCain and George Bush didn't believe that we ought to engage with Iran in diplomacy until recently, finally, in the last years of an 8-year administration. This administration is talking to Iran belatedly in a little bit. President Kennedy reminded us that you should never negotiate out of fear, but you should never fear to negotiate. Right? You can talk to somebody forever, and you can say no to them forever. But at least you're better off talking. That's how Richard Nixon, a Republican, dealt with China. That's how Ronald Reagan, a Republican, dealt with the evil empire, the Soviet Union. And here we've gone through this period where we just don't talk, we don't engage, we don't get involved, and the result is we spend more money, and we put our troops at greater risk. Now, you know how else this matters to you here in Worcester? Because of gasoline, oil, because of America's dependency on fossil fuel. And here we are with a tough economy right now. People are really working hard. It's hard to make ends meet. It's hard to put food on the table for some families. It's hard to be able to pay the bills. We got a home heating crisis facing us that may be coming down the road as we go into the fall. We got a lot of folks who are working harder but earning less, or earning the same, but as the cost of tuition goes up, the cost of health care goes up, the cost of energy goes up, but the pay doesn't go up, and it ought to be. It could be if we were making the right decisions. Judgment. This is where judgment is important. 4 years ago, I laid out a plan for America to become energy independent. 4 years ago, when I ran for president, I laid out a plan for how we could increase American security, increase our health, protect the environment, and create jobs, all at the same time. And this administration has not done those things. We still haven't passed out of the Congress, because of Republican objections, the incentives that would allow companies to go invest in alternative and renewable energy and create an alternative source of fuel. And guess what? Create a whole bunch of jobs for Americans if we were to do that. So, folks, this is important stuff. You know, I mentioned John Adams at the beginning of this. John Adams, as David McCullough, who wrote the book, told us or reminded us, he and Thomas Jefferson and these great names, they didn't think they were, you know, to us that's history, right? We're looking into the past. But to them it wasn't history. To them it was their present. It was their moment where they were making decisions to break away from a king and create a country and live in freedom and have all these wonderful choices we have in America. But we're a young experiment still, folks. 229 years. I've lived 65 of them. And looking around the room, a few of you have lived about as many. But here's the deal. We've got to decide what we're going to do with our time here. What's our legacy going to be? That we're going to leave this place to our kids in worse shape than we were given it? That we didn't invest in our communities? You know, we drive on roads that our parents built. We go through tunnels and we ride on trains that our parents and our grandparents built. We get to go through parks and in a city that by and large our parents put there. You know, what's our gift? We have to be making decisions for you know, the infrastructure of our nation. We have a high-speed rail system, supposedly, that goes from Washington to Boston, right? Do you realize it's a train that can go 150 miles an hour? Guess what? It can only go 150 miles an hour for 18 miles of the track. 18 miles. You can go to Germany, you can go to France, you can go to England, you can go to China, you can go to Japan, and you can ride on a train that goes 200 miles an hour. All the way. It's shameful what's happening to us. We can't even get our airport system to work properly so that we have an air control system that's working so we can decongest the skies and fly more effectively and save billions of dollars. We've got cars that are congested, sitting in moving parking lots on our roads. And people sort of, oh, it's not okay. We're wasting billions of dollars every day of gasoline. We're wasting billions of hours of time of people trying to get from here to there. It doesn't have to be that way. But it will be if you don't put people in positions of responsibility who make good decisions about what you're going to invest in. John McCain wants to extend and make permanent the very same taxes breaks for the wealthiest people at your expense that George Bush did. I don't get it. That's not good judgment, folks, when you look at what's happened to our economy already, and when you look at the fact that the wealthiest people in this nation have gotten wealthier and wealthier at the expense of the people who are doing most of the hard work and who are struggling to get into the middle class or stay in the middle class. And I'm not kidding you. In the 1980s, the top 1% of income earners in America took home about 9% of America's total income. In the 1990s, it went up to 16%. You know what it is today? The top 1% of America's income earners takes home 22% of all of the income in this country. So the gulf is getting bigger. You know, Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican, stood up against that kind of thing happening. Teddy Roosevelt stood up and said, we're not going to allow, he refused to take money from the oil companies. Exxon, back then. And he said, no president should be taking money from all the big oil interests because you may have to make decisions that are against their interests. John McCain the other day not only announced that we ought to drill offshore, which doesn't do anything to lower the price, but he started a whole bunch of money flowed in from the oil companies. We're living in a different time. The reason I'm running for re-election to the United States Senate is because I see these choices and I feel these choices. And I know we can do better than we're doing today.